thought it was just another day at sea, until the ocean split open. The line snapped, the ship jolted sideways, and from the depths it rose, a creature not seen in generations. Longer than a bus, heavier than a truck, smart enough to fight back. This wasn't just a whale, it was the whale, and it wasn't running, it was hunting. Hold on, brace the rail. The deck shrieks beneath their boots as a monstrous wave slams the starboard side. Metal groans, cables snap like gunshots. Somewhere below, in the vast black of the ocean, something titanic is pulling. Voices shout over the wind, "Hold the line," but the line is vanishing, dragged down into an unseen abyss. Then, without warning, the surface ruptures. A geyser of white water explodes skyward, and within it, just for a breathless instant, a colossal mass surges from the sea. It's not a submarine, not a shadow. It's a living mountain of flesh and muscle. A giant whale, darker than the storm clouds, breaching with the force of a freight train. Its tail alone could flip a vessel. The men freeze, eyes wide, hearts slamming against their ribs. "Fire the main harpoon!" Someone screams. The steel shaft launches, trailing a hiss through the wind. Impact. The whale vanishes beneath the foam again. The line goes taut, and chaos begins. One man loses his footing, sliding toward the rail. Another grabs him just in time, their boots slipping in seawater and diesel. "Cut the power!" A voice roars as the beast pulls them sideways. It's not just a fight, it's a hijacking. The whale isn't fleeing, it's attacking. The ship groans under the tension as if it too feels fear. And in that moment, as the ocean begins to boil again, the men realize this isn't just a catch, it's war. The morning breaks, but light never truly arrives. A veil of ash-colored mist hugs the sea, blurring the horizon into nothingness. Beneath a leaden sky, the ocean rolls in endless, groaning waves, vast, indifferent, eternal. The steel ship lurches forward through the fog like a ghost, its engines thudding with anxious rhythm. On deck, men in soaked orange slickers grip cold rails, their breath forming clouds, their eyes locked on the sonar screen. Then, a flicker. A blip too large, too slow, too deep, to be anything but one thing. "It's back," someone mutters, barely audible over the wind. The giant whale. Not a legend, not a fluke. A leviathan that stirs the deepest layers of the sea. One that dwarfs even the largest steel hulls. It's not just its size, it's the gravity it exerts on the world around it. The way the water seems to curve with its presence. Below, the sonar draws its outline. A massive arc bending across the screen like the spine of the earth itself. Men stiffen. No one speaks. They've seen whales before migrating in pods, rolling beneath calm waters, but this is something else. Alone, massive, ancient, and circling. The wind shifts. A gust cuts through the fog like a warning. The sea heaves once, then stills unnaturally, as if the ocean itself is holding its breath. Because when a creature that big moves, the world listens. This wasn't fishing, it was war, and every man on that vessel knew it. The giant whale beneath them wasn't prey, it was a force of nature, a creature forged in the cold black heart of the ocean. With each hour that passed, the air thickened, not just with mist, but with tension. The men gripped their tools, not like fishermen, but like soldiers. Every harpoon wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement of defiance. On the horizon, storm clouds gathered, but no one flinched. Engines rumbled low like distant thunder. Then it happened. The whale rose again, not fully just enough to remind them it was watching. A massive eye, glossy and ancient, broke the surface for a breath. For a moment, man and beast met gaze to gaze. There was no panic, only silence. A silent vow exchanged across the waves, and then it vanished. The sea swallowed it whole once more, and the hunt resumed. But now, it wasn't just a mission. It was personal. This wasn't a battle of strength. It was a duel of endurance, of willpower, a clash between steel and instinct, between the small hands of men and the monstrous tail of a creature older than history. And as the harpoons were readied and the lines drawn tight, the crew understood they were no longer the hunters. They were challengers, and the sea was watching. It struck without warning. 1 second, the sea was eerily calm. The next, it exploded in a violent surge of foam and fury. The giant whale breached fully this time, its massive body soaring skyward like a rising cliff. Water cascaded off its silver-gray back, each droplet sparkling like shrapnel. Then it came crashing down, slamming the surface with a sound like thunder splitting stone. The entire ship shuddered. Men staggered, shouting over the chaos. "Harpoon, now!" The steel spear fired, hissing through air, striking deep into the whale's flank. The beast recoiled, its deep bellow vibrating through the hull itself. Lines snapped tight, gears screeched. The cable screamed as the creature dove, trying to drag the ship with it into the abyss. The crew scrambled, boots slipping on drenched metal, rushing to secure the winches. "Brace the anchor point," someone yelled. But the whale wasn't just retreating, it was fighting. It twisted mid-dive, its tail whipping up a tsunami that washed over the deck. A crate of chains tumbled, narrowly missing a crewman. Harpoons quivered. Every nerve on board was stretched thin. This wasn't the clean strike they had hoped for. The harpoon had landed, but so had the consequences. Locked in combat now, man and whale were tethered by a single line of steel and fury. And as the ocean churned and the clouds blackened above, the ship was no longer a vessel. It was a battlefield. The steel cable groaned under the pressure, each vibration like a scream echoing up from the deep. Winches spun, straining, their gears slick with seawater and grease. The giant whale pulled harder, its mass and fury making the vessel creak as if its bones might snap. Men shouted across the deck, voices hoarse, eyes wide with adrenaline. "Tension's peaking!" One of them yelled. Another threw himself at the brake lever, boots skidding, rain stinging his face. Beneath the surface, the creature rolled, its great body writhing. The harpoon embedded in its side like a thorn in a titan. The water above it bubbled, boiled, then burst as it breached again, twisting violently. Its mouth opened not in agony, but in defiance. Dozens of baleen plates lined a cavernous jaw, water cascading like a waterfall from its maw. It wasn't just a beast in pain, it was a monarch in revolt. The sea churned with its movements. The cable snapped taut once more, then slipped. Screams rang out. A fisherman was nearly dragged overboard before two others seized him by his harness. Fingers bled, ropes burned skin. The deck was chaos incarnate. Somewhere in the chaos, someone whispered, "We're not holding it, it's holding us." And they were right. The battle line wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Each man began to feel the same question clawing at the back of his mind. What if we never win? The wind shrieked louder now, as if the sea itself was warning them. Waves grew teeth, slamming the hull in rapid succession. And then, without time to brace, it came again. The whale's tail surged from the water like a wrecking arm forged of flesh and fury, slamming down beside the vessel with such force that it sent a wall of seawater crashing over the deck. The ship lurched hard to port. Men screamed, tools skidded across the steel floor, and one of the flood hatches cracked with a metallic yelp. "She's trying to drown us," a voice cried out, half in awe, half in terror. But no one had time for fear. Pumps kicked on, ropes were rethrown. Hands trembled not from cold, but from the sheer force they were trying to withstand. The whale wasn't escaping, it was punishing. It moved with the chaos of a storm and the intelligence of something that remembered being hunted. Another breach, this time at the bow, closer, too close. Its mass sent a shockwave through the water, knocking a crewman flat. He rolled toward the edge, only to be yanked back at the last second by another pair of bleeding hands. Thunder cracked above. Salt and rain merged. The sea no longer felt like water. It felt like war. And the whale, colossal and unyielding, was no longer the target, it was the storm itself. Then silence. For the first time in hours, the wind eased, the waves steadied, and the cables hung limp. It was as if the sea had exhaled. The crew stood motionless, soaked to the bone, ears ringing with the ghost of chaos. Somewhere beneath them, the monster had gone quiet. "Where is it?" someone whispered, eyes scanning the black water. The radar beeped once, twice, then flatlined. Nothing. Only the endless, shifting surface. But silence on the ocean was never peace. It was a warning. And then it happened. Barely 20 feet from the ship's flank, the water bulged outward slowly, ominously. Something enormous was rising. The men stepped back instinctively, mouths dry, tools forgotten in their hands. And then, like a nightmare surfacing from the subconscious, the whale emerged. Not in motion, not breaching, just rising. Its head broke the surface first, slick and smooth, barnacles clinging like ancient armor. And then they saw it. The eye. Massive, black, and hauntingly calm. It stared at them, not in rage, but in recognition. A gaze that seemed to say, "I know you." The world narrowed. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. And then, thwump, the second harpoon launched. It struck true, embedding deep with a bone-rattling crack. The whale shuddered, then vanished beneath the waves once more, leaving only a vortex of froth and steam. The silence shattered. The hunt had resumed. But this time, they weren't chasing it. It was calling them. The ship roared back to life. Winches spun. Cranes groaned. Cables trembled under tons of pressure. It was as if every part of the vessel had become a muscle straining, pulling, resisting collapse. The men moved in rhythm now. A crew forged in crisis. No more shouting, just short, sharp commands. Tighten the aft line. Hold it there. Brace the beam. Salt stung their eyes. Oil smeared their hands, and every tendon burned with fatigue, but no one let go. The giant whale was hooked, fighting below with every ounce of its impossible strength. The line shook like it was alive. Somewhere beneath the surface, the beast twisted, its body spanning nearly the length of the ship. Its power didn't just come from size, it came from refusal. Refusal to die, refusal to yield. And above, on the deck, the men matched it with their own defiance. Their boots clanged on steel in time with the whine of hydraulics and the shriek of metal under strain. It became a brutal, haunting symphony man and machine against nature's titan. The smell of diesel and brine filled the air. Water slapped the hull in steady rhythm, echoing the pulse of the chase. The sea had become a stage, and every sound, every motion, was part of a performance that bordered on madness. No one spoke of victory. Not yet, because the cables still trembled, the beast still fought, and the battle song of the deep wasn't finished. Then, everything shifted. Without warning, a groan echoed from below, deep and sickening. The deck vibrated. A crewman turned pale. "We've got stress on deck 4, someone shouted. And just like that, order unraveled. A metallic snap rang out like a gunshot. One of the lower support beams gave way, sending crates sliding and sparks flying. Water burst through a seam near the starboard hold, flooding fast. "Pump station's online now," yelled the first mate, already ankle deep in seawater. The whale, sensing the weakness, surged again. The cable shrieked. The hull screamed back. Men scrambled, grabbing ropes, bracing winches, trying to hold the line even as the vessel itself began to betray them. In the engine room, red lights blinked violently. Power flickered. The storm hadn't returned, but the ocean didn't need waves to punish them anymore. The damage was coming from within, from the pressure of the fight. It was as if the sea, through the whale, had found a way inside. Steel bent like bone. The crew's breath came fast, chests heaving, the taste of salt and fear thick in their mouths. Even the most seasoned among them had to wonder, was this what it felt like when the sea decided to fight back? When the hunter became the hunted, and the ship itself turned into a coffin adrift on gray water? The captain didn't blink. Reinforce the shaft. We're not letting go. And so the crew dug in, not just against the whale, but against the ocean itself. And then it rose. The cables went taut, pulling with a force that bowed steel. Winches groaned, engines strained, and slowly, painfully, the weight began to lift. The water parted, like curtains torn open by invisible hands, and from the dark, boiling depths, the creature broke the surface. First came the crown of its massive head, slick and scarred, barnacles scattered like ancient battle medals. Then its back, impossibly long, curved like a breached hull, glinting silver beneath the stormlight. Water poured off its sides in sheets, every droplet a shimmering ghost of the deep. The whale hung there suspended halfway between sea and sky, caught but undefeated. Silence fell over the crew, not the silence of relief, the silence of awe, of disbelief. of reverence. Even the waves held their breath. This wasn't just a whale. It was the sea given muscle and breath and memory. One man dropped to his knees without thinking, staring up as if before a god. Another whispered, "It's bigger than anything I've ever seen." No one answered. They couldn't. The creature's eye opened again, barely visible behind a veil of salt and mist. It looked not at them but through them, as if it knew something ancient, something that could never be told, only carried. Then it exhaled once through its blowhole, releasing a tower of mist into the air like smoke from a forgotten war. The hunt was ending, but the memory of this moment would never leave them. Chains rattled, winches locked. The air was thick with tension and diesel, yet no one spoke. Every man on board moved with a kind of sacred caution, like pallbearers carrying something too ancient, too powerful, to be handled casually. The giant whale now lay half suspended over the flatbed cradle, its immense body, a cathedral of flesh and force. Deep ridges carved its back, scars marked battles long past. Salt water still poured from its mouth, streaming like tears down its enormous jaw. Steam curled off the crane arms as they labored under the weight. Slow, steady, the captain murmured into the radio. The gears responded with groans of obedience. On deck, boots splashed in puddles of brine. Orange raincoats clung tight to shivering backs. No one dared look away. The beast wasn't dead, not yet, but it had surrendered. Or perhaps, more truthfully, it had allowed itself to be taken. Not with weakness, but with a weary grace, like an old king handing over a crown no longer needed. And the men, they didn't cheer. They didn't laugh, or boast, or swagger. They simply stared, breath fogging the air, knowing they had not beaten nature, they had endured it. The ocean, for once, had let them win, and in the quiet whir of final pulleys and the clink of securing bolts, something unspoken passed between them all. This wasn't just a hunt, it was a reckoning. The sky had lightened to a washed-out gray, the kind that comes after the worst of the storm. No Sunday, just the hush of a world that had roared itself hoarse. The whale now lay fully restrained, its tail finally resting, its eye closed not from death, but from surrender. The sea, once wild and furious, had gone still, not calm, respectful, as if the ocean itself acknowledged the battle that had taken place, as if it too had bowed its head to the weight of what had been taken from it. On deck, the crew moved like shadows, tired, bruised, soaked to the soul but standing. Their hands bled through their gloves, their legs trembled beneath the strain, but no one faltered. They had not just survived a hunt, they had survived a myth. The kind of story old men tell quietly over rusted docks and unfinished bottles. Mist clung to the ship's railings, and the salty wind carried no bite now, only memory. The scent of sweat and salt and steel lingered in the silence. It wasn't triumph they felt, it was reverence. Because deep down, they knew the whale wasn't just a creature. It was the embodiment of everything the ocean could throw at them. Size, force, will, and somehow they'd met it and lived to tell the tale. The winch gave one final groan, securing the last lock, and with it, the ocean seemed to exhale, a rare, fleeting peace. Earned, not given. Work began before the adrenaline faded. The cold, sharp hiss of hydraulics, the low growl of chainsaws revving to life. The giant whale, now motionless on the deck, no longer thrashed or resisted. But the men approached it not as victors but as witnesses to something sacred. Industrial lights cast long shadows over its glistening body, revealing the full span of scars, the decades of survival etched into its skin. Each mark told a story no human would ever fully understand. The dissection was mechanical, efficient, yet solemn. Thick layers of blubber gave way to muscle, sinew, bone. Each cut, each pulled chain, echoed like a drumbeat across the deck. The spray of mist and blood mixed with fog, curling into the air like incense from a forgotten ceremony. The steel floor ran red with warmth against the cold. No one joked, no one rushed. The ritual had begun, not a celebration but a transformation. The beast was becoming something else, provisions, data, legacy, but never just product, because the men knew, deep in their bones, that what lay before them was not just catch, it was consequence. The cost of daring to confront the deep, The cranes swung, the winches hummed, flesh gave way to purpose, and above it all, the whale remained silent. Not broken, just returned. Returned to the world of men, who would carry its story forever. Mist drifted low across the deck like smoke on a battlefield after the fight is done. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction, watched in silence. No wind, no waves. Only the steady clatter of chains and pulleys, the hum of saws echoing off steel. The giant whale, its skin now marked by cuts and cables, lay still, regal even in stillness. Its mass dwarfed the men who worked around it, and yet none of them moved without a kind of quiet permission. The line between life and death, between reverence and reality, blurred here beneath the overcast sky. Blood mixed with seawater, forming crimson veins that snaked down the drainage grates. The men didn't speak. They didn't need to. Every motion was understood, rehearsed, not by training, but by something deeper, an instinct born from generations of those who had lived by the sea and sometimes barely lived through it. Above them, gulls circled but did not dive. Even they seemed to understand. This was not carrion, it was sacrifice. The salt in the air carried more than ocean, it carried memory. Echoes of earlier hunts, of boats lost, of men pulled under, remembered only by the sea. And still the work continued, methodical, measured. With every cut and lift, the men dismantled a titan. But the ocean never turned away. It bore witness to power, to pride, to price. Long after the engines cooled and the saws went silent, the sea remained still. The giant whale was gone, reduced to weight, data, memory. But its presence clung to every surface of the ship. The crew, quiet and hollow-eyed, sat in the corners of the deck, sipping burnt coffee with trembling hands. They had won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like having stared into the mouth of something older than time and been allowed to walk away. The ocean gave no thanks, no farewell, just fog curling along the bow and a hush that pressed into every breath. Somewhere below, in the dark world where the whale had ruled, silence spread outward like ripples. They hadn't just pulled up a creature, they had disturbed a legend. Each man knew, without speaking, that something in them had changed, that the ocean had taken a piece of them in return for what they'd taken. It always did. It didn't roar in anger. It didn't drag them down. It simply waited. For the next time. For the next name. For the next reckoning. Back on land, they would tell stories. Of steel cables that screamed. Of eyes the size of dinner plates. Of a whale that fought like a storm. But those who'd never been there wouldn't understand. Because out here, it's not about conquest. It's about remembering who the real giant is, and knowing that one day, the sea might not let you come back.